Welcome to the second season of the Exploring the Core podcast. My name's Greg Mullen, and I'll be hosting this new season of episodes, digging deeper into the ideas from the first season. Ideas like standards-based grading, social and emotional learning, and a developmental mindset for an inclusive learning environment. When that first season came out, I was also promoting my book, which highlighted how those three ideas overlap to create a self-directed learning environment in a school setting. The book is actually called Creating a Self-Directed Learning Environment, Standards-Based and Social Emotional Learning. And it is available through Corwin Publishing. But in also releasing that first season of this podcast, I was able to connect with and share insights from a number of education experts who have not only been inspirational in my own journey, but they've long been promoting these ideas in schools all over the United States. And so I'm excited for this second season, where I'll be speaking to another group of innovative educators, including school leaders, university professors, classroom teachers, and education consultants, who are all involved in public, private, and democratic school settings. It's a big season. And for those who have listened to the first season's episodes, I want to point out a change in the format because I will be focusing more on the insights for my conversations with all of the guests in this season. And each episode will be highlighting layers of underlying concepts and principles, all of which do connect in support of self-directed learning in a school setting. And it's how they all connect that I really want to talk about in this introduction. Essentially, what I'm exploring is the core of who we are and how we learn. And yes, I know that sounds heavy, but each episode is going to be digging deeper into specific layers of a model I designed that ties together concepts and principles long researched by a lot of really smart people who are all working in the same direction, if not by the same path. And what I want is to get us to this larger point that who we are and how we learn needs to be the focus of how we approach change in our education system. And because I know this is a big conversation, I want to give you a way to visualize how all of these topics fit together. It's a metaphor, but it's the best way I can think of to show you what I mean. And to do this, I'm asking you to visualize a rainbow, something you might draw in color at first with basic colors, red, orange, yellow, green, blue, violet. And from there, imagine those colors blending into red, orange, yellow, green, blue, violet. Now let's go deeper and visualize a clear or stormy sky behind that rainbow, because maybe it's raining or has just stopped raining, or maybe it's still raining off in the distance. And now consider the time of day when there's just that right angle of sunlight refracting off the moisture in the air that you're able to clearly see the colors in the sky. Now, if you can, imagine yourself where that rainbow is, standing in the sun and the mist. And consider how the weather patterns elsewhere are responsible for the weather conditions you're experiencing as you stand amidst the colors of that rainbow. And maybe we think about the elevation or the ecological diversity of the trees, the grass, the wildlife, because all of these elements play into where that rainbow came from, but they're not the rainbow itself. In fact, if I were to ask you to hold even a piece of that rainbow in your hand, you couldn't, because a rainbow isn't real. It only exists through the combination of all of these elements. And it's only through a picture that we draw or take with a camera that we can look at and discuss the elements responsible for what we perceive is that rainbow. And that's what I mean when I say I'm exploring the core of who we are and how we learn. We can imagine a fictional person. We can imagine ourselves, but it's in the layers of elements that make up not just our physical self, but the elements responsible for our expressions that cause our reactions and responses to decisions and the decisions of others. It all plays a role in who we are and how we learn. And by exploring this core, I get into the layers and elements that support the larger overlapping ideas of standards-based grading, social emotional learning, and a developmental mindset for an inclusive learning environment. And that's why, to help explore these ideas, I'm really excited to share conversations with so many innovative leaders in education, and I'll be sharing their experiences and insights to give real life meaning and purpose to the value of what I'll be referring to as a self-directed schooling environment. Because there are public school districts who have realized the traditional model isn't working for all students. And like one alternative school leader described it, a district is like a very large ship that can be very hard to turn. And some districts are finding ways to work with and alongside smaller, more personalized, self-directed learning communities, like a fleet of smaller ships that can more easily shift course to personalize education for their community of families. Now, this approach does require bottom-up implementation, so students, parents, and teachers will need to be willing and able to get involved. And it does need to also have top-down support to create this shift in authority and responsibility for learning from strict top-down hierarchical structures to a more egalitarian structure. And I addressed this element in one episode, but remember, each element by itself won't be the thing that fixes education, because education isn't a thing to be fixed. It's a living, breathing function of all of our efforts and conversations and decisions. And by exploring the interdependence of ideas in these different layers of who we are and how we learn, taking the time to create a shared language for how these layers influence each other, we can actually celebrate what we might already be doing to personalize education in some ways, while still find inspiration to adopt and adapt new ways that help personalize learning even more for the families and communities our schools are already serving. And it all comes back to this idea that a standards-based and social emotional approach to learning can create a self-directed learning environment, but that it isn't going to be a standardized or franchised model that will work for all students. And you might be thinking that the word standard is literally in the word standardized, but I argue that they are two different words with two different meanings, different purposes, and it's about finding that balance of effectiveness over efficiency, of growth over proficiency in academic, social, and emotional competencies, which we must separate from the oversight and accountability of physical and mental health and safety in adults as well as children. I believe that this season, by exploring who we are and how we learn, will support the larger movements in education like standards-based grading, social emotional learning, and a developmental mindset for an inclusive learning environment. And I'm excited for you to listen to the many innovative leaders in education highlighted in these episodes. So with that, I want to thank you for listening, and I hope you enjoy the second season of the Exploring the Core podcast. Talk to you next time.